My apologies. So, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Daniel Herrera from Police Network, and today we're hosting the INDIMO-SPROUT Webinar, planning for more inclusive transition of urban mobility. And well, today these are the rules for the webinar. So the session is being recorded. Please leave your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. The questions will be picked up at the end of the session. We will have also an interactive question session during the panel discussion session through Slido, and all presentations will be, and the recording will be uploaded to both project websites. The agenda for today, we have the introduction to the webinar. We have then the introduction to the INDIMO project. We have the introduction to the SPROUT project. Then we have a short presentation by Valencia Port Foundation on the SPROUT Valencia pilot e-lockers in Valencia metro stations. Then we have a presentation by the Emilia-Romagna region on the INDIMO pilot on digital lockers installed in the region of Mogidoro. And we will follow with a panel discussion where we will discuss the key stakeholders, challenges, barriers, drivers, benefits, differences and commonalities of both use cases. And we will also discuss how can we make more accessible and inclusive measures as smart lockers. Finally, we will have the Q&A and closing session. So I would like to give the floor to our moderator, Imre Kesero from the Free University of Brussels.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for the introduction. And I would also like to welcome all of you to this joint webinar of the INDIMO and the SPROUT projects, and welcome you in the name of both projects. So also a special welcome, because this is probably already like number 46 on your list of webinars in the past 2 years. So we understand that it already takes quite an enthusiasm and interest to join any more or any new webinars. So why SPROUT and INDIMO together? Why did we organize this webinar? Well, there are a number of reasons. Well, both projects are looking at innovative and often disruptive new mobility and logistics solutions, although from different viewpoints. And they are both addressing policy response to these new mobility and logistics solutions in terms of how to break down the barriers of using them, but also to make sure that everyone can benefit from these new solutions. The projects, both of them cover both mobility and logistics and delivery solutions, including smart delivery boxes, which will be in the focus of this event today, but also other innovative solutions like digitally bookable ride-sharing solutions, smart traffic lights, or autonomous pods that can transport goods, but also people. So there is a wide variety of solutions. What is common that they are all new, innovative, and also raise many challenges, especially among policymakers, but also with other stakeholders. And another reason why we are also here, that there are many partners which are involved in both projects, including ourselves, the VUB, also Zaragoza Logistics Center, the project coordinator of the SPROUT project, but also Police and Technion are both involved in the project, which also gives us another opportunity to strengthen the synergies between SPROUT and INDIMO. And last but not least, both projects have been funded by the Horizon 2020 program of the European Union. So today's focus is on smart delivery boxes. And as you have probably all experienced in the past 2 years, e-commerce has really seen a huge increase in most of the countries in Europe. And although we spent a lot of time at home and we could expect and accept our deliveries there, alternatives to home delivery have also seen a huge increase because for example, delivery boxes can also have an impact, a positive impact, and reduce the negative impacts of home deliveries. So, of course, these solutions are not only related to logistics, they have also links to mobility, which we also examine in these projects, since a delivery box is usually used when people travel from or to somewhere, so as part of their journeys. So it's also interesting to see in these two projects how they relate to personal travel behavior. So in the next 10 minutes, we will give you a very short introduction to the INDIMO and the SPROUT project. And I promise we will keep it short because many of you have already followed these projects, but there are always people who are new to one of these projects. And then, as Daniel said, we will have a more in-depth look at two of the pilots of the projects, focusing on smart delivery boxes and the challenges, barriers, and drivers that can help to support such solutions. So I will take the floor first and give you a very quick look at the objectives and the expectations of the INDIMO project. I will share my screen. So INDIMO stands for Inclusive Digital Mobility Solutions. But why do we need to make mobility solutions inclusive? Well, the reason is that recent statistics have shown that 80 million people in the European Union never use the internet, and also 42% of the people have no digital skills. At the same time, we see that new transport solutions have been emerging, which can only be used by having a mobile phone or an internet subscription. Just think about the e-scooters that you can only rent through your mobile phone or different car sharing services. So for these people, these services actually are not accessible. So we need to think how we can also make these people enjoy the benefit of these new innovations. So based on this, the main objectives of INDIMO are to improve the understanding of the user's needs towards the digital transport ecosystem, but also to improve knowledge about the requirements of users in such a personalized digital transport system. We have developed a co-creation approach which aims to create tools for the main stakeholders of digital mobility to make these new solutions inclusive and also universally accessible. And universality is a key word here, since we build the project on the approach of universal design throughout the whole co-creation process to make all digital transport applications accessible to all members of society. And finally, of course, we would also like to influence policy by feeding our results into European, national, and local policies. So who are our main stakeholders? Well, first of all, we have the developers of digital applications, for example, software engineers, software developers, who may need guidelines on how to make their interfaces, their applications more accessible and inclusive. Then we have the operators of the services, who similarly might need guidelines on how they can communicate, how they can deal with their customers in a way that is inclusive and accessible. We also have the policymakers who see all these new solutions coming to their cities and regions, but they might not have the tools to assess, to see if these new services are really accessible to the whole population. And finally, we have the citizens, which includes both users and non-users of digital mobility services, who are or should be the final beneficiaries of these services. So their needs are really critical, especially if we consider the needs of vulnerable to exclusion people. In the project, we are developing 4 key outputs that are aimed at these target groups: the Universal Design Manual for Digital Transport Services, which aims to help especially developers and operators in designing services and applications that are conform to the Universal Design Principles. Linked to that, we are also developing guidelines for better interfaces, which are also universally accessible. If that is, for example, a mobile phone interface or a booking website. But also it's very important that we are looking at cybersecurity and privacy, because vulnerable people are more prone to be exploited by such attacks and theft of privacy when they go online. And finally, all of this will come together in a policy evaluation tool, which will be a practical online tool to help policymakers to decide if a service is accessible and inclusive, and to help the stakeholders to make them better. We are testing these tools in 5 pilot projects, which look at diverse and different digital mobility solutions, including delivery and logistics. For example, in Madrid, we are testing a bicycle logistics platform, which arranges deliveries of healthy food to vulnerable people. And in Emilia-Romagna, which will be in the center of today's webinar, we are introducing digital technology in a rural area through smart delivery boxes. But we also look at how we can make inclusive traffic lights for people with visual impairments. In Berlin, we are looking at how on-demand ride sharing can be more accessible for single women, for example, and carers. And in Israel, in Galilee, we are also looking at informal ride sharing for women who live in ethnic towns. So we have this wide and diverse set of pilots. But as said, our focus today is on Emilia-Romagna, and my colleague from the project, Eleonora, will talk about the pilot in detail. And as I said, we have developed a co-creation approach, which is based on local communities of practice and also the INDIMO co-creation community. So you are more than welcome to join us. We are in the 3rd year, the last year of the project. So this is a very exciting year for us, because we are going to produce the final versions of our outputs, our guidelines, our tools. So we are always looking for interested stakeholders who can test these tools and provide us with feedback. Thank you very much for your attention. And after introducing INDIMO, I would like to give the virtual floor to Teresa de la Cruz, who will give us some insights into the SPROUT project. Teresa, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Sinte. I will share the presentation with you. Okay, now you should be able. Let me move you here. Now you should be able to see my screen. Okay. Okay, so thank you again, Inre, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa de la Cruz from Zaragoza Logistics Center, and I will be presenting you very in brief the European project SPROUT, a sustainable policy response to urban mobility transition. I have kept this slide in order to remind us this statement that according to the United Nations, the European urban population is expected to be over 80% in 2050. This will probably aggravate the current issues that we have with our environmental and noise pollution, and will probably as well aggravate the traffic congestion issues that we have. Also in European cities, it can be observed urban mobility gap, meaning that there are a few very innovative cities, pioneer cities, taking the lead towards sustainable mobility. However, the rest of them are like a bit trailing behind the first ones. And there is a digital transformation that we are experiencing in our lives, in industry, in society in general, and this is impacting as well the mobility, as Inre has already explained. And we have seen in the last years how new business models enabled by digital technologies are blooming in our cities. However, sometimes those new business models do not really fit into the local or sectorial regulations. And it can be seen as well the other way around. From an economic perspective, sometimes the governmental issues are affecting or are hindering the implementation and development of new business models. So in this context is where Sprout was conceived. We believe that urban mobility is in transition. However, the impacts of the new mobility solutions are quite unclear. So in Sprout, we believe that policies should respond and adapt to those changes, with the cities leading the required transition. And with cities leading, we don't only mean the mayor and the mobility department, but also the different stakeholders that are part of the city. So the main aim of the project is to produce new and practice-based knowledge and tools to navigate urban mobility policy through this transition. So Sprout will provide a city-led innovative policy response capable of harnessing the impacts of the new solutions, making them more attractive to the users and more sustainable for the society. And in order to achieve this, we have 5 key objectives. First, to understand the transition in urban mobility, then foresee and identify the impacts of this, the impact of the drivers of this transition. Formulates a city-led innovative policy response, and that's what we are finalizing now in the timeline of the project, and then to provide to the cities tools to enhance local policymaking capacity and navigate future policy. The different objectives have linked outputs, and regarding building capacity, we want to create a data-driven early policy alert and action tracking, and provide cities training in policy design and policy implementation. And regarding the navigate the future policy and international cooperation agenda between the states, China, that are involved in the project, and also Europe, and a European strategy on this topic. In order to achieve our outcomes, we follow an onion-like approach, let's say, and in the core of the onion will be the first layer cities, are 5 cities that have actually implemented new urban mobility solutions and have developed a policy response in order to harness their impacts. And then we have a second and third layer of cities cooperating that will support us in order to enrich those policies and in order to make them more widely applicable to the whole European context. In Sprout, we are really lucky since we have a total of 40 cities involved in the project, 15 of them being project partners. Valencia is one of the pilot cities that have implemented mobility solutions, and later today, Carolina from Fundación Valencia Port will explain the use case of the smart lockers in metro stations. And well, in total, there were 9 use cases that were selected, covering different focus on passengers, focus on freight, and also mixed transport, freight and passengers. Different levels of innovation, and as well different levels of disruptiveness of the solutions. And finally, in Sprout, we not only validate the results among our 40 cities, We have also created what we call this open innovation community on urban mobility policy. It's an virtual platform where the stakeholders interested on this topic can meet. We share the project results with the OIC members, and they provide feedback and enrich the outputs. So if you feel interested, you are as well more than welcome to join our OIC. Yeah, and that's all from my side. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Teresa. It's great to see that there are so many linkages between SPROUT and INDIMO in terms of looking for evidence and evidence-based policies involving the stakeholders, especially cities in the project, and also trying to have impact on capacities in cities. So I think there are many synergies. So we are really happy with this collaboration and hope we can continue in the coming months. And as promised, now we will dive a little bit more deeply into the projects and specifically the pilots that focus on smart delivery boxes. So first of all, we will hear about the pilot in Valencia from the SPROUT project from Carolina Navarro. She's an industrial engineer and she has a master's degree in ports management and intermodal transport. And she has been working for the Fundación Valencia Port since 2007, and she's the director of the City Port Mobility and Cruises. She has participated in different projects, both national and internationally, in the field of logistics and intermodal transport. So Carolina, you have 15 minutes for the presentation.
Thank you for your kind introduction, and thank you, SPROUT and INDIMO, for inviting Valencia to present one of the use cases that we have implemented within the framework of SPROUT project. As Teresa said, in Valencia, we have developed 2 use cases. Our aim was to develop an intermodal urban passenger, but also freight node that consists mainly in 2 use cases that were implemented in some of the metro stations. With this node consists in 2 separate cases. The first that you can see on this line aims to integrate better the bikes and the public transport means into this intermodal node, these metro stations. And the second one that I will explain more in detail is integration between the passengers and the last mile freight distribution through the collocation of these new advanced services into the intermodal node, that is the metro stations. With all these use cases, both of them, our aim was to improve the quality of the services provided by the metro operator that is called Metro Valencia. We will to complement the services that are on the metro stations, improving the intermodality, using the connection with other private transport modes, such as the bicycle, but also to increase and promote the use of the station as picking points for parcels, reducing in this way the number of last mile vehicles within our city. And why? As Imo has already explained, and also Teresa, the e-commerce is growing in the last decade, and due to these e-commerce needs, we also need more urban transport to move all these parcels. And as all of us know, 20% of the greenhouse gases emissions are caused by transport, and more specifically, the main responsible is the road transport. And also last mile distribution is one of the main responsible of the cost, but also of emissions in transportations. That means that Of course, new business model for last mile distribution are needed to achieve the Green Deal objective 2050. That's the reason why from Valencia we are supporting new tools, new methodologies, and new vehicles to reduce the emissions that the last mile distribution is causing to our city. I'm going to show you a very short video that talk about both use cases.
Vivir en una ciudad más sostenible requiere la optimización de la movilidad y la logística urbana de manera que se reduzca su impacto ambiental y social. A este objetivo responde el proyecto SPROUT, en el que participa Valencia junto con otras 5 ciudades: Pádova, Cáliz, Budapest, Tel Aviv y Ningbo. En Valencia, en línea con el Plan de Movilidad Metropolitano, se van a implantar 2 pilotos, uno destinado a fomentar la intermodalidad de pasajeros del metro, instalando aparcamientos para bicicletas, y el segundo para facilitar la distribución de última milla. Para esto se instalarán taquillas inteligentes, gestionadas y operadas por correos para la entrega de paquetería en las estaciones de Colón y Xàtiva en Metro Valencia y en la de Luceros en el tram d'Alacant. Gracias al segundo piloto, se fomentará la intermodalidad entre la bicicleta y el metro, instalando parkings seguros de bicicletas en algunas de las estaciones de la red de ferrocarriles de la Generalitat Valenciana. Se trata de estacionamientos inicialmente gratuitos y sencillos de utilizar con la tarjeta de abono transporte. Las primeras estaciones en contar con el servicio de ciclopark serán las de Torrent-Avinguda y Empalme, el Metro Valencia, y en Benidorm, en el tram d'Alacant. Gracias al compromiso de todos, lograremos una ciudad más limpia y sostenible. En este proyecto participan Ferrocarrils de la Generalitat Valenciana, la Fundación Valencia Port y el Ayuntamiento de Valencia, con el apoyo de la Consellería de Política Territorial, Obras Públicas y Movilidad de la Generalitat Valenciana, financiado por la Comisión Europea a través del programa Horizonte 2020.
Okay, sorry because it's in Spanish, there are subtitles in English. Well, I'm going to focus on the presentation on the second use case, that is the e-lockers, that in Valencia or in Spain, we selected the CityPack commercial solution that is developed and operated by the company Correos. Correos is the postal operator in Spain. And this solution is a quick and easy solution for collecting, but also sending and returning the parcels through these smart lockers. There are so many e-lockers that you can find it close home or work, on some other private places like a supermarket or gas stations, but also thanks to SPROUT, in Valencia, some of them were located on public spaces, and more specifically in some metro stations. What does it offer? Well, you can receive on these e-lockers your online purchases. You can also manage your returns. You can use it for sending parcels. And we have more than 5,000 CityPack lockers in Spain. And during the last year, we have already reached some public spaces in Valencia, thanks to SPROUT. That is the main difference that we have achieved on the project. It was the first time that in Valencia we have e-lockers on metro stations that complement the services that are providing this public company. How it works, all the users, metro or not, can be registered through the webpage of CityPack. You can choose which of the CityPack locker suits better for you, for your address or your workplace, and you will receive a code. Once you have buy your clothes, your shoes, whatever you want, if you select this CityPack as a final destination, you will receive an SMS or an email with a code to go to the CityPack, and with this code you can open the door and take your parcel. In Valencia, we have 2 lockers installed in 2 of the metro stations located in the city center, but also as the operator of the metro in Valencia is also operating the metro in another Valencian region city, that is Alicante. They decided also to transfer this experience to Alicante, and therefore we count also in Alicante with 1 e-locker in Lucero's station. In terms of stakeholders, clearly the main stakeholders should be the public transport operator. In this case is Metro Valencia company, who provide the line for the use of the public space for this purpose, but also we need a logistic operator. In this case, we have Correos, as I already mentioned. Correos is not a part of the consortium. We were searching for several solutions available in Spain, and we contacted with some of them, and finally we selected Correos because they were completely aligned with the needs of the project, because they wanted to expand the services that they were providing in some of these private spaces, but also in some public locations. That's the reason why they quickly replied to our answer, and therefore we count on the participation of Correos. In the SPROUT project, also the municipality of Valencia is participating, and they also have been taking part of the decisions for the implementation of the locker. And we, Fundación Valencia Port, have been acting as coordinator of the pilot in Valencia as research institution. How we implement this solution in Valencia? Well, first we have to make an analysis of the precondition of the requirements to implement these kind of solutions. The requirements of the characteristics that Correos told us to be fulfilled was, as shown in the slide, they need to be in areas with more than 2,500 inhabitants. It should be in urban areas. They need to be sure that no any other lockers are installed on the influence area. They need also to guarantee that the location is long opening hours, preferably 20 hours per day, and also, of course, accessible and available for all people. In these regards, we were also analyzing where to exactly allocate the e-locker. We were thinking about if it was more convenient to install the locker before the barrier that you pass before the metro, or inside the metro station area where only metro passengers are allowed to enter. And finally, we decided to put on the metro station, but before the barrier, in order to be accessible for all people, not only metro users of these days. And also regarding the technical requirements that we were talking during the introduction, in this case, we have to guarantee that the location have 3G coverage, of course, electrical connections. It should be an area protected for the weather, and we need at least half square meters to install these solutions. Taking into consideration these conditions, we analyzed 12 metro stations. We also have into consideration and demographic and population analysis according to established criteria by Correos. That means age, volume, or occupations to determine the area of influence of the points, in order to guarantee that in the area there are potential e-commerce buyers, and also take into consideration the age of the population that should be between 16 and 60 years old. susceptible to be buyers of internet, but also users of some digital solutions. And taking in consideration all these analyses, also the volume of population around this point, and also the volume of parcels that in the area are being delivered, two main train stations were selected. As I mentioned, Sativa and Colón. Sativa is the metro station closest to the long train station of Valencia, therefore is one of the more affluent station in Valencia, but also Colón. Colón is in the core location in the heart of the city and the commercial area, with a big quantity of metro passengers, but also a lot of citizens that go to the city center to buy or to work. Just to finish this first part of my intervention, some of the challenges that we face during the implementation. First, we have some legal constraints that we have to sign an agreement between Correos and Metro Valencia because Metro is allowing Correos to install in a public space these lockers, and therefore they have to sign an agreement, and also they have to pay a fee for the land use, and that was something new, and Correos decided to analyze in deep these taxes, but also in terms of Metro Valencia, they didn't have any reference of how they have to receive as a revenue for this public space concession. Therefore, once they decided, the process to sign the agreement take a long time, and therefore we will need some more fluent procedures in order to foster the implementation of this kind of sustainable solution for last mile distribution. Also, we think that the implementation of this kind of solutions has to be linked directly to another policies. For instance, we need to implement truly restrictive policies punishing the use of bans in the city center in order to push people to find solutions to receive their parcels and to search for these new local solutions. I think also we as citizens still need more awareness to use new alternatives. Also, we have to be more familiar with digital solutions in urban logistics. And I think also private companies need incentives, because at the beginning, these kind of solutions don't generate enough revenues, and they need to be supported by the public or government in these regards. I think I have coped 15 minutes. Thanks for your attention, and now we will have, after the presentation of Eleonora, we will have time to discuss in deep about both pilots. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolina. Indeed, Carolina will also be a member of our panel discussion later on, but we already have had a couple of questions in the chat which relate to the pilot. So I will take just 2 quick questions to Carolina. One question relates to the monopoly of the public mail company Correos. Was it not disputed by competing private providers or similar other services? So was it considered to be really a monopoly, or was it open to other companies to establish these boxes?
We opened the discussion with other companies. It was not only Correos, because it used to be a private company, but now it's not a public company. So, sorry, but we opened the proposition to other private companies offering this kind of services. There are not so many, and maybe you can think which one we contacted also, but we didn't receive any reply from their side. And Correos, as I mentioned, was very willing to participate because it was in its plans to further implement e-lockers in other kind of locations. And I mean, I think now in this context, it's an advantage that Correos is public-private because these kind of solutions need time to penetrate in the market, and I can say that it's not financeable viable during the first stage. Therefore, maybe it's because this is one of the reasons why Correos is also supporting this kind of initiatives.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We will answer the other questions in the chat, and there is also a question which will be answered during the panel discussion, but we have to go on now with the next presentation. So thanks, Carolina. So the next presenter will be Eleonora Tu. She's an environmental engineer, and she's a project manager at the Institute of Transport and Logistics, dealing with several aspects of sustainable transport and mobility, including intermodality, digital services, and mobility planning. And in the INDIMO project, she is the pilot leader of the testing activities in Emilia-Romagna in Monghidoro. So, Eleonora, the screen is yours, and you have 15 minutes.
Hello everyone. I hope you can see all right and you can see my presentation as well. I would first like to thank the entire consortium of INDIMO for this opportunity to speak about the pilot that we have implemented in Emilia-Romagna. I'm, as Imre kindly introduced me, I'm Eleonora Tu. I'm a project manager at the Institute for Transport and Logistics. And with this presentation, I would like to give you an insight of our own testing activities, which are, of course, related to the installation of a digital locker in Emilia-Romagna. Our digital locker, unlike others, has the opportunity to both enable e-commerce, but also to offer other services. And I hope that with this presentation, I will have the opportunity also to explain these extra services to you. Unlike the pilot that we have seen from Sprout, one of our project partners of INDIMO is Poste Italiane, which is the postal service of operating in Italy. So the object that you're going to be seeing is actually a product of Poste Italiane. So INDIMO has 5 pilot activities, and we are number 1 in this slide. So Emilia-Romagna is located in the north of Italy, and we have chosen an area which is in a rural part of Emilia-Romagna. Although the pilots in the INDIMO project are quite different to one another, we have the same objectives, and particularly we want to support inclusive digital mobility. So as Imre suggested before, our project is still ongoing and is going to end this year. So also our pilot is under implementation. We have successfully passed a preparation, set up, and phase 1 aspect of the pilot. So we have had the opportunity to set up the pilot, but also to assess the user needs and requirements. We are now in the phase of redesigning the service. So we are actually taking in some of the experience that we are getting from the pilot in order to make it better and to make it more inclusive and accessible for everyone. So the object that you see in this slide is the digital locker, and it offers a number of services. For once, of course, is the shipment and collection of several parcels. And here I think it's very important to notice that it has got the possibility to run a usual B2C delivery. So you can order from a website and have your goods delivered there. But it can also manage C2C deliveries, C2X actually, which means that I, as a user of the pilot, can put any object in this locker and have either a carrier or another person to get to it and obtain the object with just a code. The digital locker was thought as an addition, let's say, to some of the services that are regularly offered in a post office here in Italy. So there is the possibility to collect correspondence that needs to be signed. Also, there is the possibility to pay postal bill that, for example, are utilities or others. You can recharge telephone cards and also recharge prepaid cards, which are owned by Poste Italiane. And I think here it's also important to underline that actually this locker is available not just to Poste Italiane as provider of the service, but also to other transporters and carriers and providers of services. So actually, I can also have packages delivered from services other than Poste Italiane to the digital locker. Similarly to what we have seen in the pilot of Valencia, it is possible to interact with the locker by having an app that is installed on the phone, and then through the app it's possible to scan codes, to receive QR codes, and so on. In the case of our locker, our main targets were rural residents, migrants, and older people. So we had two objectives for our pilot. So we first wanted to improve the inclusion of some groups that are traditionally left out from these technologies. Also, Carolina mentioned the importance of having a financially viable service. And the problem is that in a lot of locations, there is actually no such possibility because, for example, the entire Monghidoro has got about 3,700 people. So it's probably not going to be the first location that anyone would think for a digital locker. And this actually creates a gap between an urban setting and a rural setting as the one of Monghidoro. So our idea with this project, with this pilot project, was to try to narrow this gap and introduce this kind of technology also in, let's say, a non-conventional place, such as a rural area. Also, we wanted to make this object available to people with a lower level of digital skills. And I think we'll have the opportunity to discuss later on, actually, the aspect of digital skill is actually a challenge for using this type of devices. Digital education can be improved pretty much anywhere, as we saw in the very first part of this workshop, but particularly by having sub-object, we really hope that people can get close to it and actually understand and appreciate the benefits that this object can have. Actually, when we started the project, the pandemic had not yet kicked in. So our expected outcome now would also be that it could improve the service of the post office in the time of pandemic as well. So just to give you an idea of the area that we are talking about, here you can see a picture of Monghidoro with some of the figures from 2019. And of course, this is the scale of this small town is completely different from the scale that you have seen in Valencia. As I was saying, the population is 3,700 people, maybe a little bit less, it varies, but actually places like this very often suffer from a decrease in population in time. And there is a 9% of these people that are considered foreign population in the sense that they don't have Italian citizenship. There is quite a big chunk of the population that is over 65, which is considered, let's say, elderly people. But actually, younger people, I can say there are not many in this town. There is one library, one drugstore, just 2 food stores, and 1 post office, which is not open throughout the day, but actually only in the morning. So as you can see, and I really want to stress this, the magnitude of the scale, it's completely different from what you may have seen in other contexts. So the area of Monghidoro is actually quite large, and it has got several peculiarities. One of them is the fact that actually the population is spread out in what we call fractions. So like small settlements which are not in the city center in the town center of Monghidoro. And a lot of people actually live in these small fractions, especially we are talking about foreigners. A lot of foreigners live here because the cost of life in general is much cheaper, especially when it comes to rent. And here we have also observed from the interviews that we did earlier on in the project that there is, let's say, an issue, or more specifically, actually, a gap in the integration of some of the people. For example, people coming from Pakistan, some families coming from Pakistan, they're still very much attached to their culture, and for example, women in those families don't go out very much, and sometimes they don't even speak Italian because they don't have the opportunity to actually practice or to join any course. Also, because Monghidoro lies in the hills and actually quite close to what we could call a mountain, the internet connection is not very good. Actually, some areas are really not reached from any sort of connection. And we have, I think, a quite high presence of completely undigitalized people, which can prevent them from using some really basic services, not just the locker. When we were looking to install the locker, we had some prerequisites that were given from our provider and project partner, Poste Italiane, but we have also added some desires for our pilot. So the prerequisites were that it had the locker had to be in an enclosed space, possibly with some kind of security, for example, a CCTV, and it should have an adequate level of internet connection. We didn't realize how these 3 aspects could influence and how challenging they could be on the installation. So actually later on, we actually decided that we also wanted it to be in a public space, because of course this is a public funded project, and also we wanted, we've had several talks with the mayor of Monghidoro, with the municipality of Monghidoro, and we wanted to allow people to understand the initiative was a public one and not a private one. The locker has the possibility to operate 24/7, but of course, if we had to put in into a public space, it would be constrained by the hours, the opening hours of the space. So we actually spent a number of months trying to find a suitable location, but also to try to fulfill all the prerequisites that I just mentioned, for example, internet connection and so on. And okay, so finally in October 2021, we managed to install the locker. This has been done in cooperation with the municipality of Monghidoro, which has always shown quite big support to this project. So in this picture, you can see the mayor of Monghidoro, which is the blonde lady in the right of the picture, me, of course, and a representative from our partner, Poste Italiane. So far, however, we have not got many users that have taken advantage of this service. The digital locker is installed in the municipality hall, and it's very easy to reach it. It has got opening hours that are a little bit longer compared to those of the post office. And so our basically next steps are really to try to involve the population and try to let them understand what are the benefits of having such service. We think that the pandemic, of course, has taken a toll on the implementation of this pilot, because on the one hand, it could be said that this kind of initiatives could, for example, prevent the spreading of COVID, but on the other hand, we didn't have the opportunity to actually publicize it. In places such as Monghidoro, we need to use, let's say, traditional channels to involve the population, because a lot of people cannot or are not able to use the internet. So it's very hard for them to join a workshop or a seminar or an online seminar. So much of the opportunities that we had to, for example, present the locker or to be at like local events have been hindered basically by coronavirus. So the next activities that we envision for our digital locker are then to really try to push its use and see if people can receive this this service well. I had a small video to show, but I think there is not much time, so maybe I'll link it later in the workshop slides that you will find online. Thank you so very much, and I'm looking forward to the discussion with Carolina and Imre.
Okay, thank you very much, Eleonora, for this introduction to the INDIMO pilot. We have had a couple of questions in the chat, but I will try to integrate them into our discussion now that we will have in the next around 20-25 minutes around three main questions. But we also would like to involve the audience. So we have prepared three poll questions that you can answer through the Slido website and app. And the aim of this panel discussion is to focus on some key questions in terms of the implementation of these smart delivery boxes, and discuss what the main barriers and drivers are in both cities and or regions of the implementation, how we can actually cope with these barriers, and what policymakers could and can do to support more inclusive and accessible implementation. So I invite then Eleonora and Carolina on around the virtual roundtable here. And I would like to ask for the first poll question. You can use your mobile phones, or you can open the page in your internet browser on your computer. We will also put the link in the chat. And first of all, we would like to know if well, the presenters already hinted on some challenges that can prevent people from using smart delivery box, but maybe the audience actually has some ideas on what factors, what barriers can prevent people from using smart delivery boxes. So you can join the poll at slido.com. The code is on the screen, or you can also scan this barcode with your cameras. And the link is also in the chat. And we already have a couple of answers coming in, which refer to digital skills. Indeed, security, that's interesting. Yeah, no digital skills, no knowledge about the service. Opening times, access to a smartphone. No digital natives. Tanya, we lost the poll results. Yeah, okay, fine. So many of the answers relate to the digital skills, also the availability, for example, opening times, also to availability or access in terms of distance or location, but also interesting, that's an interesting one, habits. How can we actually influence the habits of people to change language barriers? And cumbersome to carry away. Storage on phone required. Indeed, you might not have the latest smartphone, so the application might not run on your phone. No Wi-Fi, no internet connection. So quite a few interesting ideas. So let's see how you see these factors in the pilots in the Sprout and the INDIMO projects. So what do you see as the biggest hurdles that you need and needed to cope with when implementing the Smart Delivery Box? Maybe let's start first with Eleonora. So if you look at this, these answers from the participants, did you spot anything that is relevant for Mongidouro?
Yes, Imre, actually, indeed, what has been mentioned by our audience is actually very well reflected in what we have seen in Mongidouro. So before, let's say, the target groups that I mentioned before, like the rural resident or elderly people and so on, there is an issue with the lack of digital skills by the people that usually populate the area. Especially in rural areas, there are not so many young people. Of course, there are young people, but it's mostly elderly people, or even not elderly in the sense of over 65, but just people that maybe don't use their smartphone or internet that much. And I think this aspect is very much tied with the aspect of security, because as we all know, it's important to ensure both security, but also a simplified access. But this is very, very hard to combine. Well, actually, I mentioned that in the digital locker, it's possible to receive signed correspondence. And in Italy, you can do that by having a digital identity. But even having a digital identity actually requires some digital skills that people usually don't have, which actually prevents them from interacting in an efficient way with the locker. So definitely the level of digital education is quite important, as it's a very important barrier. I think that another aspect is, generally speaking, the attitude that a group of people, a community, could have also towards this kind of objects. Maybe for people living in an urban environment, you have already seen lockers pretty much everywhere, or maybe gas stations and so on. But in places like Mongidouro, this is quite new. Maybe a lot of people have not seen it, and they also kind of wonder why would they need that when they have the post office to go to. So it takes some effort. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation, and I can see the difference here between the urban setting of Valencia and the more rural setting of Mongidouro, because Carolina, you mentioned that the target group is actually between the 16 and 60 years old, while in Mongidouro we are actually trying to promote this service to older people. And so how do you see the barriers, and how do you see also the role of policy to make these services accessible to also people who are over 60 years old?
Well, I fully agree with the audience and also Eleonora, because I think even it's different, the installation in urban areas and rural areas, mainly due to this, the target group that we are trying to achieve. But at the end, we are facing the same barriers. It doesn't matter if you are 16 or 80, your habits of as a consumer should be changed. Even in Valencia, we have located in the most populated area and more fluent metro stations. We are still having a very low use of the e-lockers. And I also think that is due to the reasons that Leonora has mentioned, and also the audience, is because why we are going to change our behavior if it's still working. I mean, if I can receive the parcels directly in my home or directly at my work, why I'm going to send it to a box? Maybe I'm reluctant about the security also of the locker. Therefore, maybe this knowledge of how easy is to use is making difficult to implement in a wider aspect this solution. I think it doesn't matter if you are targeting different skills that, of course, in the case of rural areas, they will need more and more training. And in our case, I think it's a question also of habits, as someone has mentioned, and to be reluctant of using this kind of solutions. And the policies should be focused on fostering the use of alternative solutions. I mean, if there are some truly restrictive policies in order to avoid vans entering to the city center, you have to find another way to receive your parcels.
Absolutely.
But the police has to be aligned, because if not, we are offering an alternative that people doesn't need.
Indeed. So yeah, as you say, habits are quite difficult to change and it takes time. So also we need to look at a longer period of time also for the
policies.
usage. Yeah, indeed, absolutely. And that leads us to the second question, which will be first to our audience. So I would like to ask for the second poll question. And the question is, you can use the same Slido poll and access details. How could better access and inclusivity of smart delivery boxes be supported? So how can we achieve the goal that these boxes are not only accessible to young and tech-savvy people with the latest smartphones, or those who have already seen such boxes, or those who anyway very often buy things online? But how can we open up this possibility and the convenience of using these boxes to larger sections of population? For example, by not requiring subscriptions, a smartphone, credit card. It seems that these can be barriers to using. And then engaging potential users. That's an interesting one, and we will talk about this, how we can actually engage them. Making clear what's in them. So indeed, what are the benefits of these boxes? Probably that's not always clear to the target groups. Organizing a trial, maybe a hands-on trial indeed, as part of a campaign. Enabling non-digital access, that's an interesting one. How we can make the digital boxes accessible in a non-digital way. Engaging potential users. So we have a couple of interesting ideas here. So let's see how our pilots are trying to address these issues. So the first question is to Carolina. Do you think that the smart delivery boxes provide an opportunity for urban areas to improve the efficiency of the last mile, and also provide benefits to the commuters?
Yes, of course. As I said, it's necessary to complement measures to improve the impact of the urban logistics in cities. And these lockers are completely complementary solutions to another restrictive urban distribution policies. And I think in our case, as we are providing complementary services in metro stations with a great affluent of people, and also we meet all the requirements of the users, because there are Wi-Fi and cameras, and therefore we are I think on the right moment and on the right conditions, and we have to take into consideration that it was mentioned that maybe if it's not necessary credit card or Wi-Fi or smartphones, but in the city, in the urban area, all the people have a mobile, a Wi-Fi credit card, and you use it for buying. Therefore, in our case, it's more than this kind of restrictions. We have to train people, or to get them involved and to create awareness from my perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. And is that different in rural areas, Eleonora? Do you need a different approach?
Well, I would agree with Carolina, actually, because even in places, let's say small places such as Monghidoro, we were talking to the mayor, and she mentioned the fact that she sees a lot of freight transport going around, and this can become a problem. Of course, the consolidation which is offered by digital lockers can actually improve the situation. Although I think it's going to be much more difficult to impose like a limited traffic zone or any sort of really political measure, city logistics measure in such a small place. And I think with regards to the aspect of the benefits of having a locker like the one I mentioned, actually it's also important that people are kind of not against the idea, because with the INDIMO project, we actually organized workshops and the so-called communities of practice, and we had some objection that actually this locker wanted to somehow substitute the post office, which is really not true, not within the objective of that we set. So it's important also, especially I would add to the case of rural areas, to make it clear that this is an opportunity to expand the services that the community has access to.
So I can derive what you and Carolina said, that the information and communication, especially with the potential end users, are really key. Because if people have fears of of these boxes, then this is not going to work. So it's a lot of investment, I guess, in terms of time as well, and we need to find, and you need to find different methods how you can actually foster this communication and improve the knowledge and the awareness of the people. And our third question relates to this. How can actually policymakers support the deployment of these innovative solutions, and how can they do so in an inclusive way? For this, we have a question for which we have defined some answers. So let's see the preferences of our audience. So the question is, how could policymakers support the deployment of innovative solutions that are also inclusive? And the answer options are: stricter regulations are needed for inclusivity, more regular contact between policymakers, developers, and operators, creating guidelines and tools for developers, operators, subsidies, or demonstrating best practices. You can select up to 2 of these options in the poll. So let's see what our audience sees as the most important actions from policymakers. Because I guess also the difficulty might be that these smart boxes might be operated and deployed by private companies. That can also eventually happen. So then what is the interest and what is the jurisdiction of the local policymakers in terms of influencing the take-up of these boxes, and whose role is it actually to make people aware of the benefits? This is what we will discuss in this last part of the panel discussion. So it seems that the winning 2 roles of policymakers here is to come up with stricter regulations for inclusivity, so require the operators and developers to be inclusive, and a more regular contact between policymakers, developers, and operators, some kind of structure, network to set up a communication. So let's see how you see it in your local circumstances. How is your relationship with the policymakers, and how can the policymakers support this? Let's start with Eleonora.
Yeah, as I mentioned several times, we are talking about a small area and actually a small community. So we are very much in contact with the mayor of Monghidoro. So I would say that her involvement is particularly important because she's actually in small communities, the point to which everyone turns when they have problems. So they have, let's say, a direct contact with her. So if she can convey the message that this is a service, this is beneficial for the population, actually this can actually increase the use of the locker, we think. Also, she can act as not directly to make specific policies, because I think that for such a small community it wouldn't maybe make so much sense, but she can surely act as the person who can endorse the service and make it perceived not as a commercial initiative, but rather as a public service offered by the European Commission.
Mm-hmm. And related to that, there was a question in our Q&A to Eleonora, and that relates to if you could share more regarding how this digital education is conducted. Are there methods such as encouraging the younger generation to educate the older generation at home? And if so, how effective are methods such as this?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. This is actually a step that we are going to be deploying in the next couple of months. So we are planning on having like specific training for people that want to access the digital locker, but also, and I think here it's very important to underline that actually our service is for everyone. So we hope that younger people and elderly people, everyone can join these kind of services. Also, maybe I just wanted to mention that when it comes to training, it's very important for communities such as the one of Monghidoro to have, let's say, a physical presence. Actually, what the mayor advised us to do is to have like a person maybe on specific days of the week or the month that can, let's say, stand by the digital locker and support in case of questions, or in case people get stuck in front of the digital locker. So physical presence is also very important, despite, of course, the challenges of the COVID pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, thank you very much. Carolina, how do you see the role of policymakers and what kind of policies they could support to increase the use of the delivery boxes in your city?
Well, I wanted to remark, because it was a question regarding the participation of the municipality and the regional government on the SPROUT project. I want to clarify that the metro station operator, that is Ferrocarrils de la Generalitat Valenciana, the metro passenger operator, depends directly to the regional government of transport. Therefore, in a SPROUT project, we have a direct connection with the regional government as the use cases has been implemented in the land that is managed by this regional government. Therefore, the support in this regards was completely by their side. Also, for instance, we are talking about the lockers that I think we will discuss about several policies that they can boost. But we have also implemented the secure parking installation for metro users that can go to the metro station with their private bicycles, and the installation was completely paid by Ferrocarrils, and is covered with your metro card. Therefore, it's free for users. And I think it's also a policy supporting, in this case, it's mobility of people, but also they have found a way of offering this public space to Correos for a very small fee. Therefore, they are, it's like an incentive, a public incentive, because Correos has not to pay a big amount of euros to use a public space for offering these services. Mm-hmm. Therefore, somehow is a direct incentive in monetary terms.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I see. Okay, thank you very much. And I will take the last question before we close, which relates to the availability of smartphones and being able to use a smartphone. As I understand, to use both of the services in Monguidoro and in Valencia, you actually need a smartphone. So the question relates to the role of local authorities to provide training on smartphone use among older people. The person who asked the question says that this is the case in his small Belgian municipality and also in the Netherlands. But in order to provide this training, older people need to want to have a smartphone. And the mom of the person who asked the question refuses to have a smartphone. She's 76 years old. So how can you actually bridge this gap of not having a smartphone, not wanting a smartphone, or not being able to use a smartphone? Carolina?
Yeah, well, it's a tricky question, because it's not only for this kind of services. In Spain now we have a movement on some elder people, led by a man, 70 years old man, that is also demanding more support for training old people, because it's not only a question, because in our case they can go directly to the shops and buy. Therefore, e-lockers are not competing, and it's not a barrier for them. But in the case, for instance, of banks, old people need to use a smartphone to make some transferences or to pay some bills. Therefore, in this case, it's not such a big barrier, because they have an alternative. But of course, I think we have to train old people in order to use smartphones for the daily things. Okay. And maybe it has to be something provided by the regional government in some of the all the schools and all these things that they.
Thank you very much. Is this the case in Monguidoro, Eleonora?
Yeah, actually here in Emilia-Romagna region, there have been several initiatives also sponsored by the region, who is who is a stakeholder of the INDIMO project, that actually were targeting pretty much everyone that had lower digital skills. So there are initiatives where they can teach you how to browse the internet, how to install an app, all these kind of things. From the experience that we had on the field in Monghidoro, we have realized that actually a lot of the elderly people, for example, they do have smartphones, but they're very limited in what they can do. But of course, they're limited, let's say, in their skills, but also they're limited by their family and relatives to just tell them, okay, please use this app in this way, and that's it. Don't touch anything else. Don't install anything else, because we don't want anything to happen to you. So, and I think that the problem is also that a lot of people who don't have smartphone or have lower digital skills when it comes to smartphones, they actually wish they didn't have it, because they maybe come from a time where they didn't have smartphones and they lived well. So it's very hard to change this mentality. But of course, there need to be more initiatives like the one I mentioned before. And within INDIMO, we really want to push this aspect of training and information as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Eleonora. And that brings us to the end of the panel discussion and also to the end of this webinar. So my conclusion from your interventions and also the questions and comments from the audience is that there are still a lot of challenges to solve to increase the inclusiveness and accessibility of not only smart delivery boxes, but digital mobility and logistics solutions in general. And some of the keywords were better communication, better awareness, changing habits, better collaboration between the stakeholders, including the policymakers, developers, and the users, to really foster this collaborative approach that we are also trying to do in Sprout and also in INDIMO, where it's not the researchers who are telling the users or the operators what is good and what they should be doing, but we are actually developing the guidelines and training materials based on what actually is needed by the different target groups. So thank you very much. So I think these projects are only the start of trying to solve these challenges, and in a way only the start of the discussion. So I'm sure we will continue this on other occasions, and we are happy to continue this collaboration with the Sprout project as well in the future. I don't know, Teresa, if you want to say anything.
No, I definitely also see that there is much synergy between both projects, and we can continue. We have started today like a series of webinars, let's say.
And we do hope that the participants today also gained some new insights into what we are doing in the projects. You can find more on our websites. And also I would like to draw your attention to the upcoming event of INDIMO, our second dissemination event, which will be on the 25th of March, where we will look at the user-centric redesign process of the INDIMO pilots for different applications and services. So you are welcome to join. And I will post the link of the page where you can register in the chat, and the agenda will follow soon. So I would like to thank all the participants today for this very interesting discussion and for the presentations. Also for the audience for bearing with us, and also the comments and the questions you posted. If you would like to know more about the projects, please go to our websites, get in touch with us, subscribe to our newsletters and social media channels, and also we would be happy to welcome you to our upcoming events and workshops. So thanks a lot, and hope to see you soon, maybe at a physical event. Have a nice evening.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending.
It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.